As storytellers, we believe it is imperative for us to study what came before us. Today we're going to take a closer look at how writers of the past have used action lines. They cannot simply be a description of what happens or how something looks. They are an art form of their own. And we even found out how you, as the writer, can subtly tell the director how to film your scene. Rather than try to figure out how to do this with one of our own scripts, we're going to be looking at Jurassic Park, and we're focusing in on part of the scene where the T-Rex gets out of her pen. The purpose of this video is to show how a professional uses action lines to gently tell the director how to shoot the film. Because action lines could just be what happens in reality, we as the writers have to make them interesting to read. If a script isn't interesting to read, it won't sell. So, with the need to make it interesting to read, but also needing to be understandable for a crew to be able to use as a blueprint for what to film, how does a professional write action lines? They start by being direct. As we look at the script for Jurassic Park, we can immediately see that the action lines are to the point. When we read a line like, "He swings his legs, but suddenly stops," "He feels something," we as the reader can see that in our minds. We can feel the emotion that is supposed to be on screen, uncertainty. So what do we see in our minds? Well, we have to know that it's Tim and we have to see his legs stop swinging. Then the line continues. He pulls off the goggles and turns back. He moves into the front seat with Lex, who is fanning her hat. He reaches forward to still her hand. The incredible thing about this action line is that it's all done in one very short paragraph. So what does Spielberg do? He gets it all in one shot. Even the boom of the T-Rex's footsteps. We get Tim's line, and then Lex doesn't answer. Then we get to the brilliant visualization of the T-Rex before we see it. Tim leans over to the front passenger seat and looks at the two plastic cups of water that sit in the recessed holes on the dashboard. As he watches, the water in the glasses vibrates, making concentric circles. Then it stops, and then it vibrates again, rhythmically. This is a masterclass in making sure each individual beat in the scene gets its own time to shine. Tim looks at the water cups, then the first vibration of the water, but it stops. Then it vibrates again. And this time, the writers mentioned the rhythm of it. And just in case that wasn't clear, the very next line clarifies, like from footsteps. Then the film allows for the three booms that happen, which also builds tension. We ask ourselves, what is that? To which the writers have a character give a possible answer.
Maybe it's the power trying to come back on.
This film is riding the line between the horror and action genres. So for this scene, the writers lean into the horror style of writing, allowing the uncertainty of what is happening to play in our minds. This is something that's difficult to do when writing a script, especially because we have to make sure that it's very clear to a crew of filmmakers what needs to be done on set to execute what's on the page. Sometimes writers will say that you write it and the crew will figure it out, and that's not the case. Your job is to write it so that it's clear what is required of the crew. We could continue on with this scene going line by line, but what we have looked at will just continue. The writers craft this scene to allow each beat of action to breathe, but also subtly telling Spielberg what to film. A lot of screenwriting books that we've read, they are adamant about not using things like dolly in or cut to, and that's for good reason. By writing something like Tim looks at the cup of water, and then in a separate action line describing what happens to the cups of water, the writers are telling Spielberg the first shot is on Tim, and the second shot is on the cups. And what's the primary way to get from one shot to the next? A cut. The Jurassic Park script is a perfect example of how to use action lines in both a horror style and an action style. By being clear with what's happening, allowing time for each beat, and using blank space between action lines to indicate a cut, the writers crafted the perfect study case for us as writers to learn from and to emulate in our own writing. So we highly recommend you try using some of these techniques in your own writing if you haven't already. And of course, studying scripts from professionals will train your eye to see what the industry likes and is always a good idea. And as always, keep writing.